So I am honoured to be speaking to someone from the other side of the world, the renowned game designer and all-around decent bloke, Martin Wallace. Martin, thank you for coming on the show.
Hi Ben. Good to be here. Yeah, glad we could sort this out eventually. It's weird when you're in a completely different time zone. It's just, sometimes you don't know what day of the week it is.
So my first question is, and this is where you get to, in society we're forced to be modest. Here you can be as braggadocious as you wish. So my first question is, when did you first realise that you were good at what you do?
Interesting question. I think it's probably with Age of Steam. Mostly because I think that was the first game we ever actually reprinted. So it's not hard to design a game. It's not hard, in a sense, if you're self-publishing, to get a game published. And it's certainly in the small quantities we were doing back in the 90s and the other days. So I think Age of Steam was the first time we actually had something that there was sufficient demand to print it again. Plus the fact that it created a community of people who wanted to design maps. So, I think that was probably the turning point. Because, I designed quite a few games before then. That was probably the turning point. But even before then, I do remember when I first went to Essen, when I did Laws of Creation, stuff like that. Essentially, you think you just want to design a game. It's like, once I've designed a game, then that's it, I'm happy. But you find that after you've designed your first game, and certainly when you've been to Essen, you see all the other games out there, you suddenly realize that you're in competition with a lot of very, very talented game designers, which is a bit scary at first, because it's like you have this moment, think, can I really do this? I did it once. Can I do it again? And it takes a little while to build up your confidence, and working at it to realize, I can do it. And now, now I'm at the stage. It's like, I don't have any anxieties or issues. I'm fairly confident in my abilities, but still screw up, still make mistakes, still don't get everything right. But So Age of Steam, that was a turning point. Boom.
So you may not know this, but somewhere in America, I think it's Kansas City. At this weekend, there was, or still is, ongoing an Age of Steam con, where people gather round the table for a weekend to just play Age of Steam. Are you surprised that Age of Steam has had these legs, that it still is ongoing and still as loved by people as it was the day it was released?
No, I don't think so. I think train games are different. I mean, there will also be 18xx conventions. That I think train gamers are just a different breed. A bit like people who play Advanced Squad Leader. You have these people where they just play a certain type of game and that's all they play. So, in a sense, no, it doesn't surprise me. It's also, going back to what I was saying before, I think I hadn't expected it before, but it was nice that Age of Steam gave other people who might not have the ability to design a game, but the ability to design a map. And back in the early days, there seemed to be maps coming up from all sorts of different places, and that's always been something that I've wanted to recreate in some other format, is to allow people to contribute to a system. Now, in Age of Steam the history of Age of Steam is long, bloody, and convoluted, and it's a mess. So I ain't doing another train game like that. But I'm working on a fantasy adventure game at the moment, a single play. It's a simple deck-based adventure game. So you play it once and then you're done. But the thing that I'm interested in is if I can get it off the ground, because it's quite a big project to do, because I have to do like a series of them. You can't just do one and then see if it's successful. But I like the idea of seeing if there are people out there who, once they know the system, because the system's relatively simple, that they can come up with their own stories and tell them in this format, which is a lot easier than saying, because the game itself is kind of based on a choose your own adventure thing. It's quite difficult writing a choose your own adventure book. They're quite complex things to do. But this is a simpler system where you don't have as much going on, but you can still create a satisfying game. So that's kind of a carryover from this Age of Steam. It's like how you can create an inclusive kind of fandom, that people can contribute to something in a way so they feel part of it, or they can express themselves through being part of something.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I've interviewed a lot of designers, and a lot of them come in from certain areas. There's a lot of designers that wouldn't be here if it weren't for Magic the Gathering, for instance. And there's a lot of designers that wouldn't be here if it weren't for Cosmic Encounter. And it seems, I can think of two off the top of my head, Alban Viard and Ted Ulsbach, who it seemed to me came in to game design through Age of Steam, designing Age of Steam map. Is it gratifying to you that you have, I can't think of a nicer term, but you've birthed, professionals in the industry through that one design?
That sounds quite a messy phrase, really. I just creating the wrong kind of image, especially with Ted. Yes, it is. I mean, it's nice if something that you do resonates with other people and spurs them on, or gives them the means to, be part of the hobby. So yes, I always felt, that one of the joys of the board games industry is it's pretty small. So it's not as competitive as other areas of life. People aren't trying to put other people down all the time. I think there's a lot more cooperation within the board games industry, and there's not necessarily that cutthroat attitude between board game companies, because a lot of the people working for them, a lot of them, they're not doing it for the money, because there ain't that much money in board games. They're doing it because they like being in the hobby. They like board games. They enjoy playing them. It's great if they saw something there and that helped them on. Because we all have to be inspired by something, I suppose.
And so what were your inspirations? If anyone knows the history of you, you started sort of in the gaming industry, working in the Games Workshop shops in the 80s. And, but you have a very sort of specific, it feels to me, Euro style before Euro games were a thing. What gave you the inspiration to make games?
Well, I'd already enjoyed playing games as a kid, as a teenager, and I've been asked this question before, and I honestly don't know. But there's just a switch that went off in my brain, and it was, I think, in my late 20s, where I thought, do you know what? I think I'd like to be a game designer, and I have no idea why. I think I was under the mistaken belief that there might be money in it, but I was soon disabused of that. I don't know. It's just that little switch. It's like, I'm going to have a go at this. And my original inspirations were, because I came from a wargaming background, so would have been people like Frank Chadwick, who worked for Games Design Workshop. He had a lot of games published by Games Design Workshop. Other games, the Breakout Normandy was an excellent game. Cross 5 April. So these kind of war games were my initial inspiration. But then one of my friends had subscribed to Sumo, and he'd started collecting these early Euro games, like the Reiner Knizia one, the Roman one, which I can't remember the name of. So then I was introduced to these Euro games. So this would have been 1990, something like that. And I don't know, it's just like I was just blown away by their simplicity, by their elegance. And at that point, I thought, even then I was thinking, if there's a way that you could combine the elegance of a German Euro with the kind of theme of your American games. So that even from the very early days, that's always been my aim, and still is today. That is my modus operandi, where it's like elegant, trying to take the simplest set of rules, but cram the most theme into it that you can.
And so, you not only are a game designer, you have been in the past a publisher, and you started Warfrog, and then you started Treefrog. What was the reason behind that? Was it simply because it was an easier route to getting your games out there?
Yeah, I mean, Warfrog is like, well, I think there's only probably one games publisher in the UK at that point, which was Gibson Games, and I had no idea. They never published that many games. I think I remember contacting the Ragnar brothers, but obviously they, thinking, oh, they publish games, but obviously they, very small company. Well, not even a company. They're just doing it on the side. So, yeah, I just decided to do it because I was working with a friend, a wargaming friend from the games club back then, and we just decided to do it ourselves. And we were just printing stuff off a Apple printer and sticking things down. I think it was very low, hands-on kind of cottage industry thing. But you could get away with that then because there weren't that many games around. And yeah, and this is like pre-internet, so everything was done, I think we got a review in Sumo, and then we started getting orders. This is when I first became aware of the potential of demand from Germany, because I started getting all of these orders. For this, the first game was Lords of Creation. I started to get all of these orders from people in Germany, which is like weird. And so, yeah, early on, it was the only way to get games out was to publish them yourself. I did get a game, and that led to me licensing my first game, which was Unschuss, which I think it was 1998. Because publishing games myself allowed me to go to Essen and sell stuff. And yeah, so Warfrog kind of ticked along for a while, but it was never a full-time thing. But I was teaching then. And then Treefrog was an attempt to give up the day job and do designing and publishing full-time. And you can't rely on licensing games to make a living. It's too difficult. It's too unless you've got one game that sells constantly. If you've got Catan or Magic the Gathering or one of those, and yes, you can do that. But if you don't have a game that sells year on year, you can't rely on licensing games to make an income. So Treefrog was a way of making sure there was a continual cash flow, and it allowed me to do things that I had an interest in, or doing games that no other publisher would look at, like God's Playground or Last Train to Wensleydale. You could do those quirky things because you only had to do 15. You're only doing 1,500 copies. It's not too hard to sell 1,500 copies back then. So you didn't have to worry about appealing to a larger market. So it's quite freeing. And the bizarre thing is, I'm pretty much in the process of going back to that model because I'm getting tired of trying to license stuff to companies because they have their own projects they have in mind. They have their own markets they're aiming at. But I've got a whole load of games that wouldn't fit into that model. So I've got these designs piling up and I'm thinking, I'm just going to do them myself because even though it's going to be a nightmare and it's just probably all going to go horribly wrong, it's like, well, at least I control the process. Although I'm aware now that you can't do things on your own, Warfrog, Treefrog, you could do it as a small enterprise. So at the moment, I am in the process of trying to get a team of people together, trying to get locals together because I'm also tired of dealing with people over the internet. No offense intended, but trying to do things with people in different time zones and so on. And it's interesting. There is the core of a group of people in Brisbane who have got those skill sets that would allow, hopefully, us working together to actually create a games company in Brisbane. There have been games companies in Brisbane before, but they're very small fry. But I'm really excited about this idea of getting together a group of people and seeing what we can do. So, yeah, I don't know if that constitutes news, but yeah, I'm going back into publishing.
So, on that, then you've got all of these designs piling up, and you've been sort of fairly prolific over your career. I was speaking to Rainer Knizia the other day, and you're not quite on his levels of prolific, but still you've had a lot of games out there. What is your process? How do you get from idea in your head to game in a box that I can play and lose at?
I think there's two lines. Recently, over the last couple of years, in a number of cases, people have come to me and said, "Can you do a game on such and such a thing?" So that was the case with Rocket Man. It was the case with Anno 1800, and there was a number of other projects that I was approached about that won't actually see the light of day now for one reason or another. That's fine, because it's nice doing games on commission, because usually they'll take the game. But yeah, there's definitely ideas that I've got that I just want to do because I think they're interesting ideas. I think, they're things that please me. They might not be for everybody, but they're things that keep me happy. So, for instance, when we went into lockdown, when COVID first hit, I thought, right, so I'm going to be stuck here for quite a while. I'll go and do that Civilization game that I've been promising myself for ages, that I've been continually putting off. So I just sat down and cranked out my Civilization game, which is one of the things I want to look at self-publishing, because again, it's too big for an individual company to do. So I'd much rather be in control of that process. Now, the thing with that Civilization game, that actually was built off the back of Anno 1800, because the core concept in Anno 1800 of having lots of different industries and so on, it suddenly made me aware, like, oh, this is a tech tree, and I could adapt this. So what I've done with the Civ game is I've taken the core of Anno and built a Civilization game around it. And the nice thing there is, with Anno, I was kind of constrained by how things are done in the computer game. So it's like, yeah, these are the things you can do, these are the things you can't do. But then when I'm doing my own game, it's like, I can do whatever I want. As long as it works, as long as I'm happy with it, I control this. So I can do things that other companies might go, no, you can't do that in this game, or that's silly, or it's like a simple example in the Civ game. Yeah. You have these different technologies that you build up, and there are two levels of horses. So things are in levels. So some things are kind of leveled. Anno doesn't really have that, but this says, you have different levels of kiln technology, you have different levels of writing, things, because things developed, and you have two levels of horses. Now, if I gave that to another company to publish, they would probably go, why do you need two levels of horses? It's much easier to have one level of horse. But you see, from my reading of the period, the evolution of horses was a key part of the history of civilization, in that horses are small. They're too small to ride. In their natural form, they're too small to ride. And it took thousands of years for the steppe tribes of Asia to actually, by selective breeding, to breed a horse that was big enough not to ride, but to pull a carriage, to pull a chariot. And it's these horses that then were traded into the Mediterranean, Middle East region, which then forms your period where you had your chariot lords, where you had your chariot armies with the Egyptians and the Hittites and so on. But then after that, with further breeding programs, eventually to get to horses that are big enough to ride. Then you have your cavalry. Then then you've got your Alexander the Great with the cavalry, and it's like, so for me, that's a crucial part of the history. So that has to be in there, because for me that feels right, even though it adds an extra layer of complexity, even though to some people it doesn't make sense. To me, it makes sense. So I get to do that. And nobody's going to change that, because I'm in control of the process. But another part, an important part of the process, and this is something when I'm talking about game design theory, and I have to keep reminding myself of this continually. It's surprising how often you forget the things that you tell other people. There's a friend of mine that I did Australia with, Amanda Mill, and she had the idea. She wanted to do a game about rock music. I just said to her, no, that won't work. Every game about music has just been awful. There's never been a successful game about music. So, but then I thought about it, and I thought, well, what about a fantasy music game? That could be fun. So I thought, what about a Dungeons and Dragons world where instead of it being medieval, it's now the 1960s, and this society has now discovered rock music. Because then all of a sudden it means you can have a lot of fun.
So it's like soul music from Terry Pratchett then.
Exactly like that. It's very informed by Terry's philosophy, from all the reading I did. And that's one of the themes in the game, in that rather than going out and killing goblins and trolls and these they're now your audience. So they're part of society. And they're part of the audience. They're also the band members or whatever. So you're even playing to the undead. It's just you have to play very loudly because the hearing's not so good. One of the things I'm trying to show through the game is let's get rid of this violence that you find in fantasy game. I mean, there still is violence. There's still a bad guy, but the bad guys are going to be robots because they don't have any feelings, except there's probably a bunch of people out there saying robots do have feelings and we should respect their rights. So,
well, at some point in the future, they're going to have all too many feelings and destroy us all, I guess.
So, but the thing is, I did the first version of this game back when I was in New Zealand, and I just did the standard tropes of make sure that the drummer is more likely to die, and it was okay, but it wasn't great. And we showed it to a couple of companies. There's a little bit of interest, and then it died. And then, so let it sit for a while. But I thought I must go back to that. And then I thought, the one thing I didn't do was I didn't do the reading. And it's one of the things I say to aspiring game designers is do the reading. I thought I just did this game off of what I know about the music industry, and really, do I know that much about it? I listen to music, I love music, but how much do I know about it? So I went away and did the reading, and that changed the kind of game I did, because I did a lot of reading on band, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, all that stuff from the 60s. And what I hadn't appreciated, and what gave me the way into the game and made it hopefully more interesting, is the fact that the 60s was a time of revolution. Okay, the revolution didn't happen, but music was part of an incipient revolution. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun if we do have a revolution? So the game is not now just about selling records and about playing gigs. It's about growing your followers so that you can take down the evil king, who's loosely based on Richard Nixon, because that fits with the whole 60s. And I've probably now lost all of my American sales because all the Republicans will be up in arms. But, and without doing the reading, I wouldn't have got to that. And then it's also given me characters that, it's like, so one of the characters in the game is a guy called Nobby Pilchard, who's based on a real person called Norman Pilchard, who was a police officer who was obsessed with locking up the Rolling Stones. Now, you couldn't make that name up, Norman Pilchard. And there's various other things that, and so there are things that. This is the wonderful thing about history, and I suppose this is why I use history in so many of my games, is that you don't have to be a story writer, because history provides lots of stories and they're true. And I suppose that, so I've done it before with things like A Study in Emerald with Australia, where you take a real world situation and you add some fantasy to it. So in this case, it's like, what I'm doing is seeing the 60s through a fantasy lens.
And so we've seen in the last sort of 5 years, and I think it started with the reprints of Brass from Roxley, a sort of Martin Wallace renaissance. And I when I was at Essen, I played Tinner's Trail, and I thought it was amazing. I'm not just blowing smoke where smoke shouldn't be blown. I genuinely thought it was great. And so, how does it feel that these sort of older games, older designs of yours are being reappreciated by, a whole new generation of gamers? I mean, obviously it must be financially beneficial, but how is it in terms of just thinking, I'm still resonant, I still have a voice?
It's good, obviously. Certainly, Brass has done very well. And without the sales from Brass, I don't know where I'd be. I mean, um, that's been my main source of income last couple of years. It's also kind of frustrating because back in the day when I was a young struggling game designer, because generally when you printed a game, you sold 3,000 and that was it. You never reprinted. So I to make a little bit of extra money, I sold the rights to various games outright to other companies. So there's quite a few games that won't get reprinted. Like, a number of companies have asked me about A Few Acres of Snow. Steam is buried. Automobile belongs to somebody else. So it's kind of frustrating that a lot of the ones that could potentially do well from a reprint probably won't be reprinted. So yeah, it's nice that Tinner's Trail's done well. That's good. But yeah, I think, and I suppose it was because my attitude then, which is the same now. It's like, it's nice if games do well. It's nice if they earn your royalties. But for me, the joy is the next game. So it's always the future. It's what am I working on next, and that's where all the fun is. That's where all the excitement is. So I never really sit back and think, oh, isn't it great that I designed Brass? I mean, it's nice that it brings money in. It certainly keeps Julia happy. But I don't. Yeah, for me, it's like, no, it's what can I do in the future? It's how can I improve as a game designer, or how can I do something different? Which is why at the moment, I'm kind of going off in this weird direction of looking at how to involve stories more in board games, which is probably going to offend all of my hardcore economic fans because they're going to be, what the hell is Wallace doing now? But although there is method to my madness, although I'm still interested in doing those hardcore strategy economic games, like the Civilization game, which is, a hardcore strategy game that would hopefully appeal to my older fans, if that's not an inappropriate way of describing them. So I don't know.
You've spoken about sort of nebulous ideas of going back into publishing and everything. But can you give us something concrete that you've got coming out in the future in the next sort of 12 months or so?
Well, I've got as I say, I'm trying to get this game Bloodstones, which I designed many years ago, and so I'm hoping to do a Kickstarter in the first half of next year. It's just, for one reason or another, it's just been a long, slow slog. I've actually had all of the artwork done for the game. I've actually got a physical copy of the game here that I've had made in China, but I can't do it on my own. And so I was looking for somebody who could run the Kickstarter for me, because there's no way I'm going to run a Kickstarter on my own. It would just be a nightmare. So I thought I'd found some people in Melbourne who could do this, who had the right skill set. And I sent them down the stuff, and they said, yeah, we're not sure the artwork is right for this, And I thought, yeah, they're right. So now I need to have all of the artwork redone again. I think this will be about the fourth time I've had the artwork done, because I want to get it right. Because the game is, have I talked to you about Bloodstones before?
You haven't. Give us a rundown.
Right. Just give me a second. I'll just grab it off the thing. Right, I'm back. So the concept of Bloodstones. So look, there's the cover. All of this artwork obviously is not final, but the key concept is that it's a fantasy war game, asymmetric combat, but all of the playing pieces are tiles. So they're like domino tiles. Okay, so each player gets a bag of bits, and you play on a cloth map, so you can have many maps in there, So in theory, I can do this game without any cardboard in it. It can all just be in one big bag. It plays really well. I wanted basically what I was looking for was the anti-Fantasy Flight style game, because Fantasy Flight tend to engineer their games, and they have lots and lots and lots of bits in it. Lots of dice, lots of cards, little dials and chips. And I just wanted a game where with very simple components, which is why I thought domino style pieces would do the job. But that doesn't mean the game is simple. The idea is that these represent different units, and you have a hand of them. And to put units on the board, you have to pay with other units. So there's an opportunity cost. And also because the tile cycle is actually, if anything, similar to Lincoln. Because because the tiles also have a pip value, and you use pips for movement and use for combat. So if you put all of your units on the board that have got high pip values, then it means it's harder to move your pieces and it's harder to fight. So you have to be careful not to put too much stuff down. So it plays really well. It plays quickly. You play a 4-player strategy game in an hour and a half to 2 hours. An hour and a half to 2 hours. But I need to get all of the artwork redone. So at the moment, I'm looking for an artist, a local art. Well, hopefully, I'm meeting an artist this Friday, a local artist who may be able to do the work for me. So, and then, as I say, there's some people in Brisbane that I've recently made contact with who hopefully will be able to help me run the Kickstarter, because they've got video equipment and they've got the organizational abilities to do that. So if all goes well, then that will be up on Kickstarter first half of next year. After that, lose track. There's a game coming from Ape Games, who they did one of my games a while ago. They did Moa, which didn't do very well. But they're doing a game, and I'm guessing it's going to be on Kickstarter probably in the next couple of months. I'm not sure. I've not had it confirmed. Which is unusual for me because it's a worker placement game, and I don't normally do worker placement games. And it was a very odd commission, because the guy, Kevin, who runs Ape Games, he contacted me. It's a few years. It must have been 2018. It's a while ago, a long time ago. Kind of COVID just takes 2 years out of things. It's 2019 and suddenly in 2021. Right. And it was a really odd commission, because he said, I've got all of this artwork and I need a game. Okay. So he sent me the artwork, and the artwork's amazing. I mean, he's even had figures done. I mean, it's the same people who did the artwork for Brass, Mr. Cuddington. So it's top level artwork, but no game, which confused me a bit. And apparently they did have a game, and, they got the artwork done, but then there were issues with the development, and it turned out the game wasn't as good as they thought it would be. And the designer didn't want to make the changes, so they parted ways. So they had all of this artwork and no game. And normally a commission like that would be, no chance, mate. There's no way that you can just retrofit a game into a set of artwork. Except I did, and it all worked. And it was scary, because it's like, okay, we've got this island, we've got this fantasy island, and it's got all of these locations on it, like a port and a tavern and so on, which is where the worker placement thing came from. So it's like, we can put a worker here, and that allows you to get some crew members, or you can put a worker here and so on. But the twist is, he had these, and even the numbers are right, he had 16 special characters, these special fantasy pirate characters. 16, not 17, not 15, 16, which means it's divisible by 4. Okay, so the twist is that each player, so basically those 16 are divided randomly into 4 sets. Okay, and so normally in a worker placement, you place a worker and you get whatever's in the box. But here, there's a double thing, is not only do you get what's in the box, but using that worker gives you the benefit on that worker. So each worker you place is a separate sculpt. So therefore, you're getting 2 things. And also, because there are additional cards in the game, everybody gets a hand of cards. Not every one of these characters will be in play, because you only play 2 out of 4. But if you've got cards with that worker on and that worker is in play, then those cards become playable. So sometimes you want to make sure if you've got a lot of cards for a particular worker, you want to make sure that that worker is in play. And then the worker cycle. So you have 4 turns. So every turn, each set of 4 rotates around one. So you don't keep the same set of 4. And it's like all of the art, pretty much, I think there's a few little bits of artwork that I could not use in this game. So I could use all of the artwork in the game, and it works really well, surprisingly well. And that was just bizarre. It's like how that came together. But it would never have occurred to me to have done individual sculpts for workers, because no company would normally do it, because it would be stupid, because it would be too expensive. Except they'd already done it. They've already sunk the money. So, hey, so rather than just having a little wooden meeple, one of the workers is like this tiger guy, and then you've got the little, fairy queen kind of thing, so you've got all the big range of different characters. So that's my plug for the Chaos Cove. Is it Chaos Cove? So that may be on Kickstarter at some point in the near future, but we'll see.
2 more questions then. So you're at a convention, and it's in the evening, and you go out for a meal. You come back from the loo, and you hear a group of gamers on a table, and you hear your name mentioned. So you sidle into the corner, and you eavesdrop on them. What do you hope they're saying about you?
Oh God, I don't care. I don't know. It's not something I think about. It's nice if people think nice things about you, but ultimately that's not what you do this for. I do it for the pleasure. Thing is, I mean, there are nice moments. So my daughter studied physics at Manchester University, and this is with my previous partner, but she doesn't have my surname, so she's got a different surname. She's got her mother's surname, and she was in her lecturer's office, and I don't know how they got into the conversation, but she, mentioned that her dad was a game designer. He says, "Oh yeah, I'm into games." And then he opened the drawer, and then it was a copy of Ankh-Morpork or something like that. And I said, "Oh, my dad designed that." It's like, "Oh wow, that's crazy." So even happened to me. I went, when I first moved over to Australia, I went to my local dentist, and again they ask what you do, because my email address is Martin@Wallace Design. So they sometimes say, "So what do you design?" "Oh, I design board games." Says, "Oh yeah, me and my mates, we play this rail game, Railways of the World." And I said, "Yeah, that's one of mine." And then, whoa, wait till I tell my friends. So there's cool moments like that. But my wife makes sure my ego doesn't get too big. She just makes sure that it's like, yes, don't get above yourself. But yeah, it is. Because I was at this convention Saturday. It wasn't a games convention as such. It was a kind of cosplay one, and because there's this company that I want to do some work with. They were there, so I was there just on their stand. And this lady, we're just playing this simple card game. And this lady says, "So do you play many games?" And I just went, "Yeah, I do," without going into more detail. Yeah. So first question done.
Yeah. So my last question then, and this you can choose to answer in any way you wish. Why is gaming good?
Why is gaming good?
You could do it in song and dance if you wish.
I could do. It's fun. It brings people together. I'll give you a solid example. As I say, my wife is vegan. I'm not vegan, but when I'm at home, I eat vegan. When we're out together, I eat vegan. And Julia is part of there's a whole vegan network in Brisbane. And when we were lived close to town, we used to go to these things called vegan eats. Where then there was this guy, Cam, who would just organise these events. So people would just meet up who are vegans, so they just get to know each other. And they're okay. It's nice, drink some beer, eat some vegan food, chat to some people. But then him and his mate, they got into board games. And so they started a vegan board games group. And what's been interesting about that is that the people who turn up to that are not board gamers. I go to regular board games. There's the League of Extraordinary Gamers in Brisbane. I go there, and people are playing Terraforming Mars, and they're playing Magic, and they're playing all the big games. But what's interesting about this is the people who are turning up there are turning up because they're vegans. They're not turning up because they're gamers. And so I've been going on, not because I am a vegan, but to help out. And I'm not playing my games. I'm taking along really simple games. Things like Six Nymph and Skull, all the really simple entry games, the stuff that I don't normally play. But it's been really good fun because these people literally have not played these games. And so they play them and, they have fun with them. But the really interesting thing is that it allows them to, it's the icebreaker thing. It allows them to communicate with other people in the group in a comfortable way. Whereas, if you go to a drinks thing and there's a group of people talking, you can't just barge in and say, I want to be part of your conversation, please, because I need to mix. But if you're sat down playing a game, then you're immediately mixing with people that you don't, that initially you don't know. And I think, and it's a great leveler. I kind of think, some of the people I play, back in the UK, think, right, so we sat around the table and there's somebody over there who's a consultant chess specialist. There's somebody there who collects dustbins, there's somebody that can, and nobody cares. Nobody cares right. about, what your status is. Nobody cares about your sexuality. Well, it certainly was the case in the UK. I don't know about America, but people are just, it's very inclusive, I always found. So, and a safe environment. And I think that's possibly why it is attractive to some of those people you might argue are towards the edge of society, because I think gamers, in my experience, aren't judgmental in that way. It's very inclusive. They just want somebody to play games with. Okay, so that's the key thing, having fun. So, and I think that's what I love about games. And they say, it's actually been refreshing playing these just really simple games and watching people have fun.
Excellent. Well, Martin Wallace, thank you very much for giving over your time.
That's okay. Go to bed now.